Welcome to Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic. And I'm your daily guide through understanding today's headlines, Michael O'Fallon. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis in early 2020, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has proven himself to be a real American hero. In particular, to the residents of the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis was determined to ensure that the rights of Florida citizens, like myself, were respected. That businesses in the state of Florida, like the ones that I am, were allowed to continue on as business as usual. And of course, Governor Ron DeSantis had to overcome the resistance of progressive totalitarian mayors like Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, and champion of the great Marxist revolution of 2021, Rick Kreitz of St. Petersburg. Governor DeSantis, as well, has led the way against critical race theory and the 1619 Project being propagated in our schools. And a side note, I do wish that Ron would have listened to me back in 2018 when we had met several times, when I had warned him that all of this was coming, but he is doing quite a bit right now. But in almost each and every situation where most other governors in the United States are towing the line of the Biden administration and doing whatever they can do to ensure that they're receiving federal dollars, Governor Ron DeSantis has stuck solidly to the Constitution of the United States and defended the citizens of Florida over the tyrannical power grab of the federal government and the CDC, our new technocrats. And even the cruise lines, whom Governor DeSantis was doing everything he could to help through 2020. Well, these cruise lines began to collude with the CDC and progressive mayors to demand proof of vaccines. Now, I will be discussing this more in a future episode. I have a lot more to say about this, and I have some inside information. In each and every challenge, though, including this one, for the most part, Governor Ron DeSantis has pushed back against creeping authoritarianism and favored human liberty. But now, Governor Ron DeSantis is leading even Donald Trump in polls for the President of the United States of America. And I personally know of lifelong Democrats who have recently said if Ron DeSantis were to run for President of the United States, they would vote for him. Because Ron DeSantis is protecting individual liberty and freedom of the citizens of Florida. And because of that, Ron DeSantis is now a major threat to their power. So now it's time to give Ron DeSantis the Donald Trump treatment. But before we go much deeper, a little bit of history on Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis was raised in Florida, was part of the Little League World Series team from Dunedin, Florida, that won the World Series. A resident of Dunedin, Florida, Ron DeSantis graduated from Dunedin High School, the Falcons. On a personal note, I am as well a graduate of Dunedin High School and grew up in the beautiful town of Dunedin. DeSantis graduated from Yale and served honorably in the military before running for the U.S. House of Representatives for District 6 of Florida. After this, DeSantis ran for governor of Florida, and his opponent was wildly progressive Democrat socialist Andrew Gillum, who was in part greatly financed by Open Society Foundation's George Soros and radical environmentalist Tom Steyer. Governor DeSantis barely won the election for governor of Florida. I mean, just by a few votes. Now, of course, his opponent, Andrew Gillum, was found shortly thereafter with 3 naked men, high on crystal meth, with one of those men being a male escort. But I digress. So Ron DeSantis takes the reins to serve the people of Florida, and Florida was booming. And then the virus came. And then, after a few months of doom and gloom predictions, which were all wrong, by the way, Ron DeSantis decided that Florida was going to stop the practice of pretending to be Wuhan province of China. He was going to stop using the CCP methodology to handle the coronavirus. And when the critical race riots started blooming all over the United States, Ron DeSantis put an end to it. Ron DeSantis enacted a no toleration for riots policy in the state of Florida. And the nonsense stopped. Florida did not repeat the errors of New York, California, or Kentucky. And he opened the state back up and stated he would never allow the state to be closed again. And Florida began to recover. Much faster than the rest of the nation, by the way. If you took a look at our hotel ADRs, that's the average daily rates of hotels in Florida, you could get a hotel on the beach back in May, June, July for about $150. But by the time you got to August, those were up near $500 to $600 because everyone wanted to come to Florida. And everyone began to move to Florida from the north and west. And Ron DeSantis' popularity was through the roof. And now, Ron DeSantis is the greatest threat to the progressive Great Reset totalitarians in the world. And I will include both Democrats and Rockefeller Republicans in that list. So, of course, now, with the apparent surge of the Delta variant, Ron DeSantis is refusing to lock down and has become a great opportunity for the Marxist Democrats to start creating reflexivity around him. I'll explain more about that in just a moment. And if you are a resident of Florida, as I am, the hourly COVID push notifications from our local news teams, whether it be from Bay News 9 or from ABC or from NBC, is relentless. It's like we are in March of 2020 all over again. And every day we hear that we have record-breaking COVID cases, by the way, in Florida. But a few questions you should be asking when you're hearing this information first, before completely panicking. Number one, we keep hearing that this wave of positive COVID cases is due to the Delta variant. What tests done through the PCR tests have revealed that this is a breakout of the Delta variant? I mean, there are larger laboratories that can reveal if it is the Delta variant, and this would take a few days, of course, and additional manpower and additional tests, which they should reveal to us how those tests are actually being conducted. But there is no readily available test to prove that the new rise in new cases is from the Delta variant. And until we know that this rise in positive cases is due to the Delta variant, then let's just put that up as conjecture for now. Number two, have the PCR tests that everyone is using all of a sudden become more reliable because they weren't before? Number three, what about all the millions of illegal immigrants who are being processed into the United States without any testing whatsoever? I say millions, but of course there are those that are being encountered. That's the word that they like to use now, the encounters. But what about those that are not being encountered, those that are just making it through? And what about those that are encountered and then who are being bussed all over the nation and dropped off? Is there even a concern about this from the current administration? Because none of these people have mandatory testing unless they say that the person who's coming in is saying that they're having symptoms. So they're just processed and sent on their way. Millions. And of course, where they're taken to are into usually red areas where they need to ensure that the vote is going to be in their favor over the next few years. But anyway, number four, I hate to report this, but many of the new cases of COVID, many of the new cases as well as many of the new hospitalizations are from people who are actually vaccinated with 2 shots. Not to mention, those that catch COVID that have the vaccines have nearly exactly the same percentages of being asymptomatic, symptomatic, severe, hospitalized, and also in terms of morbidity rates as the non-vaccinated. Almost exactly. Isn't that weird? Huh. Well, I think one of the reasons is because people with the vaccine, which is really a therapy, can transmit and catch COVID. And actually, the opposition to use ivermectin as a treatment for COVID has been rescinded by both the CDC and the NIH. But of course, they still refuse to endorse ivermectin and are for mass vaccinations with the experimental drugs that they are mandating that everyone take. But there is really no difference between the two focus groups according to the qualitative and quantitative research. Number 5. Tens of thousands of tests have been all of a sudden required in Florida with the cruise ship industry getting back on the water this last month, with thousands of guests being tested for COVID, with people living in fear. And every time they have a headache, they're running for a COVID test. Now, let me go back to the thing about the cruise ships. Now, understand this. Within the last month, anytime that you have, let's say, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 cruise ships that are leaving from the ports in Florida, each time those cruise ships are loaded with up to about 5,000 people. Some of them sailing at 50% capacity or 60% capacity, maybe 2,500. How many of those people are actually being tested? Well, all of a sudden, that's only happened within the last month. So with that, if you're talking about, let's say, 10 cruise ships on a Saturday, where you have an average of 3,000 people per cruise ship, that's 30,000 people that are going to be tested. Well, anyway. Well, heck, I spoke to a couple this morning at church that have been vaccinated and had COVID, by the way, in the past, but just this past week, they felt a little off. Something was wrong, a headache, a cold, a cough. So they got a COVID test. And one spouse, the husband, had tested positive, and the wife, the other, tested negative. Well, they were really concerned about that. So they both went in the next day for another test, and both tested negative. Isn't that odd? And they feel better now. The other thing is, with all the students returning to school who are getting tested before heading out of the state to schools that are now mandating vaccines, they're doing those in Florida before they go up. So July and August is going to be a high spiky month. Now also remember this, that basically for Florida, this is our South winter in terms of how many times people are actually spending time inside as opposed to outside. When it's 98 degrees with 100% humidity and massive thunder boomers starting at about 4 p.m. every day, the better place to be is usually inside in the air conditioning. So we're all enclosed, we're all breathing recirculated air, etc. So people are close in there together, just like when you're up north in, let's say, New York or Minnesota or Michigan, and you're up there in January and February. You're inside. Well, that's the way we are in July and August. But all of this, of course, is being blamed on Ron DeSantis, even though morbidity rates are down. And even though during the summer, when there are so many outdoor activities that the kids, and if you're going to be outside in summer in Florida, what you're going to be doing is getting on a jet ski. Maybe if you're in your teenage years, you're going to be doing something that you probably shouldn't be doing, jumping off of bridges into the water. Maybe you're going to swing off of a tire swing into the water, and all sorts of other crazy things that we as teenagers did in Florida. Injuries go up. We do some pretty crazy things here. But of course, all of this, with those hospitalizations increasing, and then those people being tested for COVID, and then finding out, wow, well, I have COVID. I didn't know that. I don't even feel bad. That's all being blamed on Ron DeSantis. Because Ron DeSantis is not acting like Klaus Schwab, or like Boris Johnson, or like Emmanuel Macron, or like Xi Jinping. Ron DeSantis refuses to take away the citizens of Florida's liberties because Ron DeSantis refuses to use the methods of the Chinese Communist Party and the World Economic Forum to crush his citizens and the businesses in the state of Florida. And if you live here in Florida, you're not allowed to miss the big numbers of COVID cases everywhere you go. Every other television commercial, every newscast, every push notification to your cell phone, every electronic sign is pushing fear of COVID and criticism of DeSantis. Talking about masks in school and how DeSantis is going to kill your children. Now, if you've listened to my podcast, The Causes of Things, over the past few years, you would recognize what is happening. Number one, this is alchemy. Let me remind you what alchemy is again. As Andrew Gillum's billionaire supporter, George Soros, would define alchemy, he would state this, quote, "The scientific method seeks to understand things as they are, while alchemy seeks to bring about a desired state of affairs. To put it another way, the primary objective of science is truth. That of alchemy, operational success." End quote. So those practicing science, in Soros's eyes, are after what really is objectively true. What we scientifically know through testing is objectively true. But alchemy's results and numbers are guided by what the alchemist wants to operationally accomplish. What is successful in their eyes. And in the case of destroying Ron DeSantis and locking down the United States, their goal is alchemy, operational success. In other words, they're using pure subjectivity and postmodern thought. In other words, whatever the answer needs to be doesn't need to be scientifically true. It needs to be morally true in what helps them to accomplish their end goals. So how was alchemy and success achieved? By using reflexivity. Now, I've been speaking publicly about reflexivity for many years at Sovereign Nations, and it was actually the center of the first public presentation that I gave back in 2017 on the WorldNet Daily Cruise. But here is a quick review. So, reflexivity, in simple terms, is a self-fulfilling prophecy, or as an outcome that can be determined or assured due to overwhelming propaganda, which is what you're seeing all throughout Florida right now in regards to COVID numbers. You've also heard me refer to reflexivity as Pygmalionism. Reflexivity refers to circular relationships between cause and effect. Circular relationships. So when we say a circular relationship, the effect needs to be the cause, and the cause needs to be the effect in many cases. A reflexive relationship is bidirectional, with both the cause and effect affecting one another in a relationship in which neither can be assigned as causes or effects. And so within the continuous feedback loop of reflexivity that is intended to change the mood or the actions of a group of people, it is important to have an incredible, well thought out, fertile fallacy. You've heard me refer to that in the past as well. And a fertile fallacy is a lie that has legs. The fertile fallacy always has a kernel of truth at its center, but is enveloped in an elaborate lie, a purely hyperbolic fantasy that can be quickly dispensed of as soon as your goal is accomplished. So think about this. How many times have you heard recently something that is really outlandish, just absolutely crazy, and people trying to tell you that, oh, that's absolutely wrong. There's no way that that's truth. But the far leftists still push it up until a point that they achieve the goal that they want. And then all of a sudden you start to hear, well, that maybe isn't necessarily true. And then it eventually fades away, but they don't care because they accomplished their goals. Like the Trump dossier. Remember the Trump-Russia dossier? Like the refusal to name the possible source of the virus as the Wuhan lab. Do you remember that back in early 2020? When you could be deplatformed from everything because you talked about it coming from the Wuhan lab? Like the lie that the vaccines will prevent you from getting COVID, which we just received from President Biden. Because all of these lies had a much bigger goal than just the lies themselves. And then the reflexivity kicks in. The feedback loop starts. Constantly on the news, always on the radio, nonstop messaging online and in social media, never-ending discussions on all news channels, politicians talking about killing people if you don't get the vaccine. Nonstop, 24 hours a day. No avoiding their constant messaging. And while the Democrats are at it, they're even using Chairman Mao and lipstick in an address. Florida Agricultural Commissioner Nikki Fried to try and undermine Ron DeSantis. Fear and hate. Fear and hate. And their target is Ron DeSantis. Because Ron DeSantis is a threat to their power. And just like the reflexive COVID crisis of 2020 was blamed on Donald Trump, the 2021 mysterious and untested Delta variant crisis will be blamed on Ron DeSantis. Because Ron DeSantis is a threat to their power. And here's the thing to think about, too. What Ron DeSantis is doing here in Florida is he is standing up as an individual. Standing up to the nonsense when so many other Republican governors have already caved, when so many Republicans in the Senate and the House of Representatives have completely caved. He is standing up to them. And that one man is causing them tremendous problems to forward their agenda. Well, what does that tell you? You need to be standing up as well. And the reason they're attacking him is because Ron DeSantis didn't act like a communist dictator crushing his citizens like the Democrats and partners of the World Economic Forum wanted him to. And so the media and the opposition party will create a media typhoon of bad news specifically created by a nonsense stew to try and hurt the one man, the one governor, the one Republican who would completely wipe out both the Marxist Democrats and the Hegelian neocon Republicans out of Washington. Every conservative politician everywhere should be following Ron DeSantis' example. Speak the truth. Defend the Constitution. Fight for the citizens of the United States. And preserve the sovereignty of our great nation. That is Ron DeSantis. And boy, today it is good to be a Floridian. I'm Michael O'Fallon, and I will see you tomorrow on Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic.